Hey, this is Brian again, and I'd like to ask you to do a favor. We can't do this work without people like you, so if you can, please like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends about Bring Back the Porch.
At a particular point in time, I was sharing these articles with friends and family members, and again, for the most part, it was for my own edification, for my own enjoyment. But people enjoyed reading it, and that led me to creating my blog.
This episode of Bring Back the Porch brought to you by Medicine at Monumental, crafting quality memorials of distinction since 1970. Well, I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time because I get a chance to talk to a fellow historian, someone who has an interest in Medicine Hat and someone who has delved into the history of Medicine Hat way deeper than I have ever gone. Welcome, William Anhorn.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Now, people know you as a lawyer. That was your career.
That's correct.
But this is something that I wanted to see. How did you ever get started writing about the history of Medicine Hat? And I guess you refer to yourself as the Mad Hatter historian.
That's correct. Well, in my profession, I was always writing. I was always doing research. But of course, it was a different form of research and a different form of writing. And when I retired, I quickly came to the conclusion that you can't golf every day. And it was somewhat by accident, really, that I began doing some writing, really for my own edification, for my own enjoyment, and I think to some degree a matter of self-preservation, to keep your mind active, that type of thing. The first story I ever wrote, it just came about as a result of being down in the United States, because my wife and I were fortunate to spend time, our winter months, in California. And of course, there's always a happy hour. And invariably, you get a bunch of Canadians around, and they talk about the trials and tribulations of going across the border, or somebody had a problem with this, or somebody had a problem with that. And during the course of one of those discussions, somebody said, "Oh yeah, it's the 30-day rule." And I thought, what is the 30-day rule? And so, as you probably are aware, if you are a visitor from Canada into the United States, you can stay as a visitor for 182 days. And the question that arose was, okay, if you come back to Canada, how long do you have to stay back in Canada before you reset the clock for another 182 days? And so everybody was saying, oh, well, it's the 30-day rule. And so, being a lawyer and being interested in that commentary, I decided to research the subject. And so I wrote an article about debunking the 30-day rule. And so basically I came to the conclusion that there is no legal stipulation about the 30-day rule, that it's basically a rule of thumb, but not necessarily written in stone. And so, again, I wrote an article about that, sort of debunking this particular 30-day rule. And that sort of led to a number of articles that I wrote about the Canadian visitor to the United States. Things like healthcare, travel insurance. I wrote an article about rental cars, because I don't know how about you, but it seemed like every time I got a rental car at an airport, they were always trying to sell you insurance, upsell insurance. And so you would decline, and then you would walk away wondering, did I do the right thing here? So anyway, I tried to sort of put that into, more simplistic terms so that people could understand what the nuances were of rental car insurance, so they could obviously make an informed decision in terms of how they wanted to proceed. So that was sort of my start. At a particular point in time, I was sharing these articles with friends and family members, and again, for the most part, it was for my own edification, for my own enjoyment. But people enjoyed reading it, and that led me to creating my blog so that there would be a central location where anybody could go and review these articles or look at those particular articles. So that's basically how I got started. The blog was pretty at first blush, sort of pretty plain, just my name and a picture of Medicine Hat railway station from the early days. And, I had categories of articles, and so I would post them. And it became, I think, popular. I probably have something in the order of 75 to 100 subscribers today. And then as time went on, I wrote articles about retirement because I didn't know anything about retirement, so it's a good place to start. And then gradually I became interested in Medicine Hat history. And it was prompted by a Facebook page. And it was a Facebook picture of a well-known local character named Phoebe Monroe. And Phoebe was sort of a person that was, I guess for lack of a better term, the first bag lady that I ever met. Somebody that was always on a park bench, walking down the street, somewhat disheveled, and people would ignore her.
She became invisible.
That's right. And so I often thought about that when I saw the picture. And Tony Giesinger was the one who actually took the photograph. He even expressed some reluctance about having posted it because he thought perhaps it was somewhat of invasion into her privacy. But it got me thinking, and I thought, there's probably a real story here. And so I did the research and wrote the story about Phoebe Monroe. And, there had been all kinds of rumors about what had happened to her. She was a World War II veteran. She lost her husband in World War II. All kinds of different theories about what may have caused what was obvious to anyone, some form of mental incapacity. And in any event, I wrote, in effect, the real story about Phoebe Monroe. And that's where I sort of became interested in genealogy, because part of the story involved finding out her past history, where she came from, how many siblings did she have, who were her parents, where did they live. And so I was able to sort of do all of that research and write the true story.
Yeah. Phoebe, I remember my mother telling me that when she was a young woman, she was quite beautiful.
She was a very attractive young woman. In fact, in the article, I have, I think, what is the only picture of her as a young woman in her early 20s. And she, yes, by all accounts, she was a very attractive young woman.
Let's pause for a moment so we can share some exciting news. We're proud to announce that our work here at Bring Back the Porch is getting noticed. From October to the end of January, our videos and reels viewed more than 1 million times. Some of those viewers could be your customers, so sponsoring Bring Back the Porch is a great way to get your message in front of them too. If you'd like to support our work here at Bring Back the Porch, we ask you to go to our website at bringbacktheporch.com and follow the links. Thank you for your support. So you sort of became a journalist, and then you morphed into a historian and a little bit of genealogy. You've covered a lot of bases.
Yeah, and genealogy has really become a passion of mine. what I have found during the course of doing my research, not only in relation to Medicine Hat, but World War One, some stories about World War II, is that history and genealogy often intersect with some amazing results. And so if you can sort of combine those two things, it really tells a much more interesting story. It sort of brings to life the little bit of history. I sort of really got involved because when I started writing, unbeknownst to me, I found out that my uncle, Bill Anhorn, had written a self-published book.
Oh?
And so I guess in that context, he was, a writer in his own right. Mm-hmm. And he was told a story about basically his life story, growing up in Medicine Hat, various stories, family stories, incidences, things of that particular nature. But in the first 2 chapters of his book, he wrote about the Anhorn family history and my grandmother, who was the Wise family history. And this is back in the 70s, where there were no search engines.
No.
There was no internet. All of his research material either had been handed down or was what we would call original source material. Mm-hmm. Original marriage certificates, birth certificates, things of that particular nature. So that's what really caught my attention. And so the very first genealogical story that I wrote was the Anhorn family history from my perspective. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of launched that genealogical career, if you will. Yeah. And I've never looked back, really, quite frankly.
Yeah. When people contact you to get your help, perhaps, in finding information about their families, you say like the internet now is a great source, but how do you know that the information is correct? How do you double check it?
Well, I mean, that's always an issue. So in terms of methods and sources of finding information that would assist someone, obviously I subscribe to Ancestry.ca. FamilySearch.org is also an internet site that allows for fairly robust search engines. So that's sort of the beginning, really. But yeah, you have to be very, very careful about the information that is even on those sites. And I've found situations where there might be an individual and there might be 15 trees, 15 trees that have been developed by various people about a particular individual. And everyone would give his birth date as 1847. Well, then you find out, well, no, he wasn't born in 1847. And you make the assumption that because there's 15 trees that replicated that birth date, that it's got to be correct. Yeah. Well, that's just a case where there's 15 people who have replicated the false information. Yeah. So again, birth certificates, census records that are available could confirm birth dates or birth years, marriage certificates, things of that particular nature, which are typically readily available on the internet through these various search engines. But again, I always caution people to be careful and double check with the sources in order to ensure their accuracy.
Yeah, I know myself in doing some family history research, one of my frustrations is when you go to a census and it's handwritten, and the handwriting is very hard to read. So you don't know what that day, and if it was written with a quill or whatever, it kind of blotched onto the paper, and sometimes you just don't know what that date is.
Right. Well, and of course, most recently with AI, artificial intelligence, you can take that information, take a screenshot or whatever the case may be, and you are able to download that, and through the science of AI, if there is such a thing, have them reproduce it. But there again, anything to do with AI has to be verified in some manner or fashion, because it's quite common now among those who get involved in artificial intelligence and use these various search engines, that AI is subject to what they refer to as hallucinations. That they somehow hallucinate and sometimes make up information just to fill the void. And so, again, like anything else, you have to verify the data and ensure its accuracy, basically.
I know a fellow who, just to kill time on a drive from Edmonton to Medicine Hat, was traveling past Three Hills, so he thought he would ask artificial intelligence for the origin of the name Three Hills, and it came up with this thing, and it didn't really sound right, so he kept asking, and finally got to the end where AI said, I really don't know. Finally, but, it was bluffing. So you don't really want to put a lot of stock into that. With the advent of the internet and the places like Ancestry.ca and the Mormon Church has a great resource too there, and those television shows where people, famous people, get their genealogy for them, do people come to you with a bit of an expectation that you can do this in a half an hour or 40 minutes?
Well, I don't know that there's much expectation. Most of the requests come by way of an email, and so generally they've done some searching of their own so that they have some basic information. So when I say I generally sort of take the information, put it aside, and when I have time, I'll go to it. I usually respond right away saying, hey, I got your request. I'm looking into it, and I'll report to you in due course. One of the things that I did, shortly after becoming involved in genealogy was join the Medicine Hat Genealogical Society. And that was interesting from the standpoint that you're now with a group of people who have the same common interest, and that's helping others research and find out about their family history. And so that's been very rewarding from my perspective. The other thing that's happened most recently is that on the Medicine Hat genealogical website, they have a place where you can ask for information, and it's called the Queries Committee. And I always wondered, that's sort of a strange name for a committee, but in any event, it was called the Queries Committee. So a couple of years ago now, they were looking for someone to take over that role as chairman of the Queries Committee. So I volunteered to do that, and the first thing I did, though, is I changed the name from the Queries Committee to the Family History Research Group, which I thought was a little bit more professional.
Truth in advertising.
That's right. Yeah. And the reality was that the group consisted of one person, and that was me. But since then, I've had a young lady who's joined the committee. Her name is Tara Betts, and she is very enthusiastic and very keen on assisting me and doing some of the research. So that's been very, very helpful. So we get some very, very interesting requests, and some of them has resulted in me actually writing a story.
I was going to say, you start to pull a thread, and all of a sudden it leads you down a rabbit hole.
That's right, and mark my words, I've been down many, many rabbit holes in my time. So, yeah, so that has been very rewarding from that standpoint. I can think of a most recent one where we received a request from Australia, and the story was that there were, I think it was 178 soldiers from either New Zealand and Australia who were found in a mass grave in France. And so this group was in the process of trying to identify the names of these soldiers so that they could have a proper burial. And somehow one of these soldiers somehow had a connection to Canada, and they had a name and a location, which was near Lloydminster. That's all they had. And so the task was to try to find the next nearest living male relative so they could get some DNA and try to do a match. So with that sort of bare information, no name, just a sort of a remote connection, I was able to locate the family, identify myself, obviously, tell them what it was all about. And I just received word like a week or 10 days ago that they have since now received a DNA sample from this male living relative, and they're very hopeful that they will be able to identify this person and give him a proper burial. So those types of things are very rewarding.
Yeah. You told me that one of the requests that you got led you to find a connection between Medicine Hat and the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, which ended the First World War.
Right, and I think
two Canadian signatures, one of which is from Medicine Hat.
Exactly. Yeah, it's again. I wrote a story about the Treaty of Versailles, which by any historian's standard would be one of the most significant events in the 20th century, which created which ended the World War I, but from a different perspective probably planted the seeds for World War II because of the requirement that Germany completely disband its military. And so the Treaty of Versailles, very important part of Canadian history, if you will. And it just so happens that I think it was Prime Minister Borden was there representing Canada as well as some ministers. He had to leave, go back to Canada for some reason. So at the time for the signatures of the Treaty of Versailles, Canada was insisted that it be a signatory as opposed to being under the British umbrella. And so on the Treaty of Versailles, there are a couple of signatures. And one of the ministers of the government at that time was the member of Parliament from Medicine Hat.
And his name?
You know what? I knew you were going to ask that, and it's on the tip of my tongue.
It wasn't Buchanan at the time, was it? Because
no.
he was from Lethbridge, but he was also an MP here. And it wasn't Finlay.
No.
Well,
I guess you'll have to read the story.
I'll have to read the story, and what we'll do is we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
So that people afterwards, when they watch to the end, then they can find out who this mystery was.
That's right, exactly.
Another story from the Second World War that you were telling me this morning, which was fascinating, and a story of Brent Dennison.
Imagine being in the boardroom with the world's most influential C-suite executives, exploring big questions about the economy, AI, and hybrid work. Welcome to C-Suite Perspectives, hosted by Steve Odland, President and CEO of the Conference Board, the ultimate podcast for professionals seeking the truth beyond trending headlines. Cut through the noise and dive into data-driven discussions, unbiased, nonpartisan, and straight from the top. Listen to C-Suite Perspectives and harness the power of trusted insights for what's ahead.
Right. Brent Dennison is, a local businessman. I know him quite well. And during the course of a discussion at some particular point in time, he mentioned that his dad had been a pilot in World War II and had been shot down over France. And so again, a light bulb went on on that. Okay, let's just check this all out. And so I wrote a story. It's called I think it's called They Evaded Capture. And so Brent Dennison was a pilot of a Halifax bomber that was shot down over France in World War II. I think there were 7 members of the crew, and they all bailed out. Several of them were killed. Mr. Dennison and his co-pilot managed to land safely in France after parachuting out of the aircraft. He tells a story, it's well documented, about being picked up by the French resistance. And over the course of something in the order of 2 months, they evaded capture in France and moved from house to house, from resistance cell to other resistance cell, in order to avoid capture, and ultimately, obviously, with the goal to get back to Britain and get back to England and to
Back in the game.
Get back in the game and fly another sortie. So it's a very interesting story, but there's a picture in the article. We have reason to believe that it was a picture of Borden Dennison, but he's walking on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, France, in civilian clothing.
Suit and tie.
Trying to blend into, the local population. And there's German soldiers all around him. And he recounts sitting in an outdoor cafe on the Champs-Élysées, as they often do, for a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. And there's German soldiers all around him. And the interesting story about that, or an interesting part about that, is that being in civilian clothes, had he been discovered not in a military uniform, he would have been shot as a spy. Oh. So again, a very interesting story about resilience, survival, and the desire to return and get back into the war effort.
Now, how did you go about researching all of that?
Well, again, I'd have to reveal my sources and methods.
Okay,
but,
a journalist does not reveal his sources.
But in any event, no. Again, you start with Ancestry.ca. Oftentimes what I will do is I'll create my own tree, not for publication because it can be a private tree, but I'll create my own tree in order to sort of put some semblance of order to that whole process, because you've got different names, different people, different eras, so you're trying to put things in some perspective. In that particular case, Brent Dennison had his father's notebooks, and he was able to recount a lot of the detail and the information. And so I was able to put all of that together into a proper story.
Yeah. Now, his father was a pilot on a Halifax bomber, and you have another story about a Halifax bomber that had a name, Medicine Hat.
That's correct. Yeah, in the course of doing some research, I came across some nose art. And for those that are unfamiliar with nose art, it was very popular among the Americans and the Canadians and British bombers to name their aircraft and to put some sort of picture on the aircraft to sort of identify it for their own purposes, I guess. And so there was a fellow by the name of Jack McIntosh, who was born and raised in Medicine Hat, lived here all of his life. His father, in fact, George McIntosh, had been a city policeman. Came over from England, I think, or Scotland, and became, a city policeman. And this young man joined the war effort, became a bomber pilot, and he received a brand new Halifax aircraft after a serious incident where a number of his crew members had been killed. And he had some difficulty dealing with those events and getting this new aircraft and and continuing in his role as a bomber pilot. So he got this new aircraft, went on a couple of missions, and successful missions. And then his crew members all said, well, now that you've been baptized, we have to name our aircraft. And so he came up with the name Medicine Hat. And there's a picture of Goofy
From Disney.
dropping bombs on what obviously is Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And that became the nose art for this particular aircraft.
Yeah.
He was always concerned about, like any pilot in those days, about longevity, because as you well know, it was short-lived. And they always, if they had gone through 30 missions, that was sort of like a good point.
Yep.
And he was able to finish his 30 missions, and he returned to Canada and survived. Another crew took over Medicine Hat, and you'll have to read the story about what happened to that particular aircraft.
Of all the stories that you have authored, do you have a favorite? Is there one that when you finished or you look back and you go, I did a good job on that one?
Well, yeah, I think I've been fortunate enough to have a number of my articles published in the Alberta Genealogical Society newsletter, relatively speaking. And there's a couple that probably stand out. One which was recently published, and it's a story about the SFTS Flight Training School number 34 in Medicine Hat, and a fellow by the name of Roots, and he was a young pilot who was stationed in Medicine Hat during World War II, graduated as a pilot, went overseas, and I received a call or email from England, Norfolk, Nottingham, as a matter of fact, and I think it was a great uncle was looking for information, and in particular a picture or any information that would confirm and give information about his station in Medicine Hat. So I was able to find an article that mentioned him. I was able to find a photograph of the graduating class, which he is depicted. And then again, curiosity got the better of me, and I said, okay, well, what happened to, pilot Roots? And I tell the story. And unfortunately, he was killed on June 6th, 1944.
D-Day.
D-Day.
Mm-hmm. But his story began here at the Surface Flight Training School.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's probably one of the stories that I feel good about, and the stories about finding a World War I soldier and trying to assist in terms of finding a lost soldier. I think is those are the things that are rewarding, because you feel like you've really accomplished something.
Yeah. I know when I was a member of the genealogical club here, people used to say, well, how do I start to write my story? And I just said, just start. Sit down, either pen, paper, in front of the keyboard, and just start it. You don't have to be Shakespeare.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, everybody has a talent, some more so than others, but everybody has the ability to record and to write and to document things. And I guess the important thing is get your facts, get the information, whether it's through Ancestry or FamilySearch.org. Put the information in some semblance of order, create perhaps your own family tree, and then start telling the story about the family history. And I think one thing sort of leads to another, and it's really an enjoyable exercise. And I think that's the thing. History is important.
It is.
But family history
Doubly.
just as important.
Yeah. You often hear people say, gee, I wish I would have paid attention when Grandma and Grandpa were talking about the good old days. Well, the good old days, you can talk to your parents now. You can record the information, preserve it for future generations. Someday it may become important to them.
Right, and that's a point well taken, because I can think of many occasions when I would have said, gee, I wish I would have asked my grandfather that, or I wish that my cousin would have been able, she would have been able to provide me with that information. So, yeah, I guess you have to take the opportunity. If someone is available, sit down and say, tell me about whatever. When did we move to the farm, or when did we move to Medicine Hat, and what was that all about? And that information can be very, very valuable, over the course of time. In fact, when my uncle, who I mentioned, wrote the book, I found out that in 1974, he recorded my grandparents. He sat down at a kitchen table and with an archaic recording device of some form or another, interviewed my grandparents. And the information that they gave wasn't particularly relevant. I mean, it was interesting. It just confirmed in a lot of respects, what we already knew. But when both my grandparents had passed away, of course, at this time, when I heard their voices, it brought tears to my eyes.
You're a little boy again.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's what you like to preserve is those memories and that feeling in the heart.
That's right. Exactly right.
Another question that I had is, when you were researching, I don't know about you, but I have boxes and boxes and boxes of people I have no idea who they were. They were passed down from great-grandparent to grandparent to my mother to me, and my mother always used to say, gee, I wish they had written on the back who these people are. But now, with the internet, can we reliably look and search and see who these people might be?
Yeah, I haven't really looked at that specifically. I think there's a lot of research out there that involves facial recognition. And so I think there is, in time, I think there will, if it isn't already here, in time, I think you will be able to find, use facial recognition as a basis for, identifying people in those photographs.
Even some of those old photographs were formal portraits, and they have the name of a photographer, I think from Bristol, England.
Yeah.
I don't know if the records of that establishment would be online anywhere.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, one of the things that I've been very fortunate in doing is reaching out to other genealogical societies around the world and other historians, and everyone is always anxious to help. And I can think of a story that I wrote where I had some question about something, and I contacted the Islington Genealogical Society, and sure enough, I got a response back. I told them what I was interested in. Somebody over there did the research, provided me with the documentation and photographs that I was looking for, which was, a real godsend. And so, as I say, much like the Genealogical Society itself, reach out, talk to somebody. If you're interested, join the Genealogical Society. You might find someone who has a particular interest in the area that you're interested in, or at least can provide you with some ways in which you can enhance your research skills. So that's, I think, one of the things that I would suggest doing.
So if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do so?
Well, if you want to go to my website or my blog, my contact information is there, my email address, etc. And you can send me an email. It's quite easy. I got to the point where I was trying to put HTTP, colon, double / WJ, okay, And I got tired of doing that, so I created actually a business card with that information on, which helps me now. And I said, well, how do I get a hold of you? Well, here's my card. And But very simple. Google
Yes.
the Mad Hatter historian.
2 Ds on Mad, I believe.
I only
You only
have
put the
one.
Oh, so you didn't give homage to Lewis Carroll.
No, well, in some respects,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, I am glad that we had this time together, and I think we might have to have another talk at some point down the road. Thank you for the visit.
All right. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed being here.
Oh, Arthur Lewis Sifton. There we go.
I knew it began with an S.
Okay. Well, yes. So thanks to Lynette Schneider, who is our producer, and she was able to find the information of the signatory from Medicine Hat on the Treaty of Versailles, Arthur Lewis Sifton. Correct. So there you go. Now we have put that to rest.
That's right.
All right. Thank you, Lynette, and thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Brian again, and I'd like to ask you to do a favor. We can't do this work without people like you, so if you can, please like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends about Bring Back the Porch.